Thanks for staying with us. Time now for Across Africa, our weekly look at stories from across the continent. I'm Georgia Calvin-Smith, and this week, Uganda's Constitutional Court threw out a challenge to the homophobic law that adopted last May that triggered international criticism, despite attracting widespread domestic support. Also, Congolese wordsmiths are using the French spoken word as a tool of advocacy and self-expression. The Tetra collective, a trio with a deep love of Congolese and French literature, use slam poetry to explore their passion for wordplay. And although gender does not officially affect land rights in Senegal, in practice many rural women farmers struggle to secure access in traditional communities, sidelining them from ownership. But first, 1 year after its anti-gay law came into effect, on Wednesday, Uganda's Constitutional Court rejected a bid to overturn it. The legislation has been widely criticised by Western powers and human rights advocates, but is domestically popular. Many members of Uganda's LGBT plus community have fled the country since last May amidst a rise in homophobic attacks. Clément Duroma tells us more.
Members of the LGBT plus community and rights defenders expressed profound disappointment this Wednesday following a decision by Ugandan top judges to uphold most provisions of the Anti-Homosexuality Act.
Because the simple question before the court was whether the equal protection of law under our constitution extends to every single Ugandan, regardless of whether we like them or we don't like them. And I think in that regard, the court, I think, let us down and failed to protect a section of our community.
This law imposes severe penalties for the LGBTQI+, with a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison if their sexual orientation is discovered. It also mandates the death penalty for cases categorized as aggravated homosexuality. According to the Ugandan NGO Convening for Equality, this law violates the principles of dignity, equality, privacy, and freedom of speech. This group has also already denounced around 50 arrests by authorities, forced medical examinations and hundreds of assaults across the country over the past year. Despite these abuses, the law remains highly popular in Uganda, although much less so among donors such as the World Bank or the US, which have restricted their development aid. The court has removed articles from the law related to the LGBTQ+ health access in the hope of resuming Western-backed funding programs.
Well, 30 years on, and Rwanda is still piecing together its understanding of the circumstances that led to the 1994 genocide in which over 800,000 Tutsis and their supporters were killed. The granular details of who did what and who was lost are also still being unpicked. But with time dimming memories and eroding evidence, survivors' organisations are racing to digitise surviving important documents. Our team tells us more.
These survivors of the genocide against the Tutsis in Rwanda are sifting through thousands of files. Their organization is still looking for information about what led up to the massacres 30 years ago.
There may be new testimonies, and there may also be information about the preparation of the genocide. We want to make these documents accessible so that researchers who need them will have access to them. Just like other people who want to know what happened during the genocide, how it was prepared, how it was executed.
After initial sorting, documents are digitally scanned and stored on dedicated computer servers. The group began updating storage of the archives in early 2022.
All these papers we sort here will be digitized. Without numbering and digitizing them, the archive process isn't complete.
Today, the preservation of documents related to the genocide is a national priority. Another NGO, Aegis Trust, focuses its efforts to safeguard history on collecting recorded accounts of what happened. This woman lost all of her children during the 1994 mass killings.
I was asked to testify and accepted because I'm sure that my story will help people heal from their traumas. It will help those who listen to me.
This center offers support to women who lost their husbands in the genocide. Many have shared their stories. The accounts are later translated into English and posted online. Every year, the time left to collect these perspectives grows smaller.
The elderly people are aging. They're starting to forget. So we mustn't miss this. We must use every possible means to record these testimonies while there's still time.
As part of its commemorative efforts, Rwanda will introduce digital tours of the 170 memorial sites that are also the final resting places of many of the victims of the genocide.
Well, Sudanese journalists have slammed the Information Ministry's decision to suspend the works of 3 foreign broadcasters. They've been accused of a lack of professionalism and failure to renew their licenses. But as the war that has riven the country approaches its first anniversary, the crackdown appears amidst an overall erosion of press and other freedoms in the country. Our regional correspondent tells us more.
Sudanese journalists working for these 3 news channels won't be allowed to work for them in Sudan anymore. Al-Haddad published a statement on social networks saying that their journalists discovered the news watching state-owned Sudanese TV, but that they were not notified of this decision. Later, the Ministry of Information published a statement saying that these journalists were lacking transparency and professionalism, but it's yet to publish any proof of these allegations. Quickly after, the Sudanese Journalist Syndicate published a statement on X, formerly known as Twitter, saying that silencing the voice of the professional media will open the door of to the spread of rumor and hate speech, and it's getting more and more difficult for professional journalists to work every day in Sudan. Foreigners are not allowed in the country anymore. That's why I'm reporting from Nairobi, and there are just a few locals still working for international news channels. They are threatened every day. Many of them have been killed since the beginning of the war on the 15th of April 2023. Some were killed by bombardments, but many have been shot either by the military or the rapid support forces. If the government, meaning the Sudanese military, decide to prevent them from working in Sudan, it means that the country will soon be in a total blackout.
Bastien Renouy there for us. Now, although legally men and women should have equal land rights in Senegal, in practice that's often not what happens. The inequality has made it particularly difficult for women farmers from communities still operating according to customs that sideline them from ownership. Clarice Fortuné has more.
Adding a bit of water, preparing compost is part of his training session in the town of Nyasia in the Casamance region. These female farmers, who traditionally have no access to education, are learning about their rights, how to finance their projects, and possibly influence future legislation.
We have 3 objectives. The first is to promote the knowledge and know-how of the farmers who have long preserved food sovereignty in Africa. The second is to influence political decision-makers to improve agricultural governance. And the third objective is to promote products derived from agroecological practices or family farming.
Mariama Sonko is the president of a 115,000-strong rural women's rights movement in West Africa called We Are the Solution. As it's the case across Senegal and West Africa generally, women are not entitled to land ownership, as it is expected when they marry, they will leave their community.
We can't follow every woman in her family's field, but we can bring them together here to build their capacity through practical demonstration sessions that will help them to better understand and improve their level of development.
Today, Mariama Sonko is trying to set up 7 new training centers across southern Senegal. In 1 week, she and her team trained over 100 women from Senegal, Guinea-Bissau and Gambia in agroforestry and micro-gardening.
Well, Congolese wordsmiths are using the French spoken word as a tool of advocacy and self-expression. The Tetra's collective, a trio with a deep love of Congolese and French literature, use slam poetry to explore their passion for wordplay. Our team reports.
In the streets of Congo's capital, Kinshasa, Lingala, one of the country's 4 national languages, is spoken everywhere.
I'm Congolese, I speak Lingala. What comes out of my mouth can only be Lingala.
French is still seen as the language of bureaucracy and state institutions, but some creatives are reclaiming the language for expression of less procedural aspects of their lives and are exploring its poetic lyricism. Wordsmiths have come together in the neighborhood of Limete for a slam poetry workshop.
Comme lors du baptême du Christ, celui-ci est mon poète bien-aimé en qui j'ai mis toute l'addiction, l'incarnation de Orphée ou de Césaire, et je lui dis Elia, Elia, l'Eloslam et Botami, Elia, Elia, l'Eloslam et Botami.
It's run by a collective called Tetra, who play with the spoken word, creatively reshaping the vocabulary, rhythm, and delivery of French.
I sing in French, but maybe that doesn't encourage me to speak French. But when I listen to slam in French, it's oral poetry. So when someone speaks in French, I have this need to understand what the person's saying, and the little French that I once knew may come back.
The performances are often political or draw on social realities, tackling concerns about governance or conflict in the country's east. The trio also draw on their love of literature, sprinkling their lyrics with references to their favourite local authors, like Zamenga, Batukezanga, or French writers like Jean de La Fontaine.
It's really interesting to take those references and put them in the texts and develop them. We're not saying they're always right, but we can challenge them and find something even more interesting.
The performance extends to their clothes. Tetra often dress as clerics, as a metaphorical demonstration of their devotion to the world of letters, by delivering their powerful verses before those congregated. Audiences, transported by Tetra's eloquence, have increasingly become dedicated devotees.
Je vous salue, Slam, petit frère de la poésie. Tetra est avec vous, vous êtes bénis entre tous les arts. Et le fruit de vos entrailles sont Benjamin Massia, Fernando Kusenje, Obed Bossa. Sainte poésie, mère des émotions.
Well, that's it for Across Africa for now. Thanks for joining us, though. Do so again if you can. Till then, take care.